This is the way to a wonderful life. Please know with me now, right now, there is a power within you that can lift your life to its highest level. It can change illness into health. It can bring peace amidst turmoil. It can bring success out of failure and victory out of defeat. It can bring companionship and happiness out of loneliness. It responds to you. For this is the power that dwells within you, and so it is. Amen. Thank you for joining me for the Way to a Wonderful Life. I am Reverend Dr. Henry Lee Bates, coming to you live from Palm Springs, California, teaching from the philosophy of the Mastermind Jesus and the wisdom of the ancients found in the evolutionary science of mind. This program is not pre-recorded, nor is it edited. It is live. For more information about this ministry, please visit www.revbates.tv or www.revbatesontheradio.org. You can also find me on youtube.com by going to youtube.com and putting in the search box the Way to a Wonderful Life channel. That's the Way to a Wonderful Life channel, where you'll find over 80 of my radio broadcasts that you can listen to 24/7 in both English and Spanish. You can also go to MSN, Yahoo, Bing, and Google and put in the search box Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, and you'll find everything you want to find out about this ministry. Now, this is a healing and teaching ministry where we go beyond religion and we focus on those simple yet profound principles given to us by the Mastermind Jesus so that we can believe in our prayer and the answer to it, for we believe and we know that God responds to us by corresponding to our faith and our belief that with God, all good things are possible. With God, all good things are possible. Now, you can send me your prayer requests, your questions, your comments about this program, and you can also send a faith offering in support of this radio ministry, which I would deeply appreciate, and you can do that from the website revbates.tv or revbatesontheradio.org using your ATM card or your credit card and the PayPal secure payment system, or you can mail those questions, comments, prayer requests, or faith offerings to Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, P.O. Box 1173, that's P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. Now, this morning I want to start off with an idea that I read about this morning on CNN.com, where there was an article about being spiritual but not religious, and how that is something that the author of the article said that people should get back to religion and let go of the spiritual and not religious, because he said that if you're spiritual and not religious, then you're losing the context of religion. But we don't need to live in the context of religion, because we know that most of religion is man-made dogma, man-made ideas that go. So when we go beyond religion, just like Jesus did, Jesus went beyond his religion. He went beyond his religion, and he focused his mind on God. He focused his mind on listening for that still small voice that created within him a greater discovery of who he was and what he was about, and not only a greater discovery of what each and every one of us are about. When Jesus said, I am the light of the world, he was telling us that I am is God, just as Moses said, I am that great I am. And since we know that I am is the image likeness of God within each and every one of us, and that we carry this image likeness of God, which is part of God's power, God's Spirit, and God's intelligence, and everything that we do, we know that the living Spirit of God is within each and every living thing. Jesus said that the Father is a spirit, and we must worship him in spirit and in truth. And so we know that if we're going to worship him in spirit and in truth, and that which we are to do best, only our Maker can teach us, as the great Emerson revealed. We know that we must be like Jesus and open our mind and open our heart and open our soul and be receptive to the guidance and direction of our Maker, of our Creator, of the Father, so that we don't get trapped by the restraints and the limitations of religion. We don't get trapped in the restraints and the limitations of religion that says we have to believe a certain way, we have to act a certain way, we have to do things a certain way, and we must live to somebody else's idea of what an ideal life experience will be. So let's take into our mind, let's take into our heart that we're open to the Spirit of God. We're open to the Holy Spirit moving through our heart, our mind, and our soul, bringing forth ideas and solutions and all the wonderful images of good that we want to experience in this thing called life, because God has created all this wonderful and beautiful things in the universe for us to enjoy. We are to enjoy this thing called life. Jesus said, I have come to tell you that you can have life, that you can have it more abundantly. Just let go of all the noise and nonsense of the world. Stop putting yourself down. Stop putting other people down. Stop falling into the traps of shame and blame, and start realizing that you are the living Spirit of God living in you, as you, for you, to experience this thing called life in a greater way, a more joyous way, a healthier way, a happier way, a wealthier way, whatever way it is that comes to you to express this God life within you, this God life within you. So each and every one of us have that opportunity today to open our mind to something greater, just as Jesus did, just as Isaiah did, just as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did, and follow Jesus. Do as he did. He said, follow me. Believe as I believe. Do as I do. Find yourself in alignment with God, in unity with the Father, so that you can realize, just as I did, that there is a light within you that wants to shine, and that light will shine on all things that concern you and bring more happiness and more joy and more love into your life. Once again, this is the Way to a Wonderful Life, and our Way to a Wonderful Life message for today is Imagine Neville, and we're going to go through some words from Neville from his radio talk shows in 1951, July 1951, on his radio talks in Los Angeles. And we know that Neville focused on imagination and feeling, but we also know that there is something within us that is going to feel the presence of God in a greater way as we go through this message. And we're going to begin with some words from the great mystical Walter Starkey from his book, The Double Thread. He writes, the most valuable word to use for the correct meaning of prayer is the word listening. The act of listening connotes withdrawing our attention from the visible scene, a turning within, a receptivity and expectancy. It does not imply the use of the mind to tell God anything. It does not imply a petitioning or a physical action. It is a realization that there is an infinite truth within us and available to us. When we understand prayer as a listening to the still small voice, speak, Father, thy servant heareth, we read in the Scriptures, we are acknowledging that within our own being we have the source which can and will guide and direct us. That's from the great Walter Starkey. And so we know that he's speaking to those same words that the mastermind Jesus said, go into the closet, shut out the noise and the nonsense of the world, shut out all that you've learned from the world, and open your mind to God. And whatever it is that you need to have, whatever it is that you need to be prepared to do, that God will guide you and direct you. God will fill you up with his power, his spirit, his intelligence, so that you can do those things, those good things that you desire to do. Now, Walter Starkey was one of the great mystics of our time, and so we must realize that in his self-discovery of this listening, that we know that he, too, was demonstrating that prayer is responded to by God corresponding to that which we believe to be true for ourselves. And the ancient scriptures, and even in contemporary writings of mystics like Walter Starkey, we are called to listen. But we are not listening to a far-off God, the primitive culture, but to that which is the intelligence that is universal in its operation throughout the universe. The mastermind Jesus was only one of many, many Jewish mystics of his time, but what separated him and caused him him to define himself as part of the life of God was his inner discovery of the intelligence that rules the universe in which we live. The Father, as Jesus called this intelligence, is supreme in its power and supreme in its spirit. It permeates all space, and its presence is right where we are, and we can have the realization of it if we listen and draw towards it in our mind and in our heart. The faculty of mind in which we do this is at first our imagination. We must get a sense of it. We must get a sense of knowing that the presence of God is right where we are, above us, below us, pressing against us, flowing through us as life itself. We must imagine that this intelligence, this aspect of God, is right where we are, and listen until we hear the thunder of that still small voice as it moves through our mind and our heart. And once we hear it, we will want to hear it again and again, for we shall find that we can trust in its guidance in all things that concern us, in all things that concern us. How often have we thought that the images that come into our mind are the intelligence and spirit of God guiding us, and how often have we dismissed these images because we fail to take the time to sit and silently contemplate what they mean to us. We are intelligent beings, and we are part of this intelligence. Jesus knew this, as did Isaiah, as did Walter Starkey and Neville. When these images come to our mind, they are but the reflection of intelligence that is within us in communion with that greater intelligence that created us and all that is contained in the universe in which we live. And we can discipline our mind to become aware of even more of these images and thoughts that take us into this higher realm of faith and belief through our imagination, We might call it our divine imagination. So let's go to these words from Neville from his radio talk in Los Angeles, 1951. He writes, "The future dream must become a present fact in the mind of him who seeks to realize it. We must experience in imagination what we would experience in reality in the event we achieved our goal. For the soul imagining itself into a situation takes on the results of that imaginary act. If it does not imagine itself into a situation, it is ever free of the result. In other words, it will never gain the result. It will always be separate and apart from the result." So Neville continues, "It is the purpose of this teaching to lift us to a higher state of consciousness, to stir the highest in us to confidence and self-assertion. For that which stirs the highest in us is our teacher and healer. The very first word of correction or cure is always arise, arise. If we are to understand the reason for this constant command of the Bible to arise, we must recognize that the universe understood internally is an infinite series of levels, and man is what he is according to where he is in that series. As we are lifted up in consciousness, our world reshapes itself in harmony with the level to which we are lifted. He who rises from his prayer a better man, his prayer has been granted. His prayer has been granted. To change the present state, we must rise to a higher level of consciousness. This rise is accomplished by affirming that we are already that which we want to be, by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The drama of life is a psychological one which we bring to pass by our attitudes rather than by our acts. So many times people will do things, but their intention, their mind is somewhere else. There is no escape, Neville says, from our present predicament except by a radical psychological transformation or renewing of the mind, as we read in the Scripture. Everything depends upon our attitude towards ourselves. How do we see ourselves? Do we see ourselves as God sees us, or do we see ourselves as less than, inferior? Do we see ourselves as put upon? How do we see ourselves? That which we will not affirm as true of ourselves Neville says, will not develop in our lives. In other words, we won't gain it. We won't gain it. We must be able to see ourselves as God sees us. We must be able to see ourselves living in the good, having more good, good and more good. Start seeing ourselves as attracting the good that we seek to experience. Good and more good is mine, and ever increasing good is mine, because we know that in the good there is God. In the good there is God providing for us our daily bread, which symbolizes every good thing that we desire, every good thing that makes this life a joy. Today is the day the Lord hath made. Let's rejoice and be glad in it, but we won't be glad in it if we're walking around with our desires unfulfilled, or we're walking around feeling depressed or put upon because we're not making any progress towards those good goals, those good desires of our heart to be fulfilled. So we stir up the highest in us to confidence and self-assertion as we realize that our imagination is part of this faculty of mind or spirit that is part of God, and that we are a part of God. I am because God is. I live because God lives in me. And as we affirm and reaffirm this until it becomes an embodiment of truth within us, then we shall never doubt our ability to create through our imagination that which we claim to be ours. Let us ever be watchful that the ego mind, that edging God out stuff, EGO, edging God out, does not suppose it can do anything of its own self and take the words of the mastermind Jesus to heart. I of mine own self can do nothing. I of mine own self can do nothing. It is the Father, in other words, this intelligence that reigns supreme in the world, that doeth the work. Yet the intelligence can only work through us, and so we must pay attention to those last few words in Jesus' instruction: the Father works, and then I work. And in that it is up to us to remain in the feeling of being blessed, remain in the feeling of being healed, and remain in the feeling of being prospered in whatever way we create in our imagination that we are. And we must hold fast to this feeling of having until it is made manifest in our experience of life, until it is made manifest in our experience of life. So let's go to some more words from Neville's radio talks from 1951. We're going to gain so much from this lesson this morning. We hear much a humble man, he says, the meek man, but what is meant by a meek man? He is not poor and groveling, the proverbial doormat, as he is generally conceived to be. Men who make themselves as worms in their own sight have lost the vision of that life, into the likeness of which it is the true purpose of the Spirit to transform this life. Men should take their measurements not from life as they see it, but from men who, while poor and unproven, dared to assume, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit, and believe this even though they're still poor and even though it's still unproven, believe it and have the faith to conceive it and have the faith to see it made manifest in our life. Such men are the meek of the Gospels, the men who inherit the earth. Any concept of ourselves less than the best, any concept, let's underline this in our mind, any concept of ourselves less than the best robs us of the earth. The promise is, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. In the original text, the word translated as meek is the opposite of the words resentful or angry. It has a meaning of becoming tamed as a wild animal is tamed. A meek man is a self-disciplined man. He is so disciplined, he sees only the finest, he thinks only the best. He is the one who fulfills the suggestion, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Think on these things. We rise to the higher level of consciousness, not because we have curbed our passions, but because we have cultivated our virtues. In truth, a meek man is a man in complete control of his moods, and his moods are the highest, for he knows he must keep a high mood if he would walk with the highest, So let's go back to those mystical words from the great Walter Starkey from his book, The Double Thread, and let's read those with a new understanding and with a new awareness as we have found as we go through this lesson this morning that each and every one of us have within us this great potential, this great possibility, this great opportunity to see ourselves as God sees us in a greater way. So Walter Starkey writes, the most valuable word to use for the correct meaning of prayer is the word listening. Listening. The act of listening connotes withdrawing our attention from the visible scene, a turning within, a receptivity and expectancy. It does not imply the use of the mind to tell God anything. It does not imply a petitioning or physical action. It is a realization that there is an infinite truth within. When we understand prayer as a listening to the still small voice, speak, Father, thy servant heareth, we are acknowledging that within our own being we have the source which can guide and direct us, which can and will guide and direct us. And as we know this is the truth for us, we can begin to feel that earnest desire to pray more, to listen more, to be in the silence more, to meditate more, because we know that every idea that's going to take us, that's going to transform our lives, reshape the conditions and circumstances in which we live, that idea is available. But we must find it. We must seek it until we find it. We must seek it within our own heart, our own mind, and our own soul in communion with our Maker, and realize, as Emerson did, that which I am to do best, only my Maker can teach me. Only my Maker can teach me, for only my Maker knows my thoughts. Only my Maker knows my measure of faith. Only my Maker knows the images that go through my mind, the images that I dwell on, the thoughts that I dwell on, the beliefs that I have accepted as true for me. So each and every one of us must know that we must be in communion with God. It doesn't matter if we imagine ourselves driving a Mercedes-Benz into a 15-bedroom palatial mansion, if we don't have the foundation of knowing that there's something within us that's more powerful than our own mind, something within us that's more powerful than our own spirit, something within us that's more all-knowing than our own intelligence. And so as we turn to its power, its spirit, its intelligence, and draw it into our own consciousness, our own awareness, then we know that whatever it is, that every good thing that we desire, whatever that may be, whether it's a greater health, a greater joy, a greater loving companionship, a greater wealth, a greater success in our work, or whatever it may be, a greater peace of mind as we go through this thing called life, that will be ours with certainty. That will be ours guaranteed. So as we realize from the words of Neville, as we did from the words of the mastermind Jesus, that meek means teachable, but Neville takes it further and uses the term self-discipline, which was not part of the vocabulary of Jesus' time, but the intention was the same. It is the self-discipline of our moods, our faith, our thoughts, and the images that we dwell on in our mind that creates our achievements of health and happiness, creates our achievements of prosperity and success, and creates our achievements of loving companionship and joy and peace and harmony, and a greater awareness of the beauty in the world in which we live, a greater awareness of all the people in the world in which we live, and a greater awareness of the beauty within our own soul. And it is a self-discipline that creates within us the feeling and the knowing that we have. And then once this feeling of having, as Jesus said, it is done unto us as we believe. We can know it, we can believe it, and we can know that what we believe to be true for us is ours to experience in the right and perfect time and in the right and perfect way. So let's go back to some more of these words from the great Neville. We hear much of the humble man, the meek man, but what is meant by a meek man? He is not poor and groveling, the proverbial doormat he is generally conceived to be. Men who make themselves as worms in their own sight have lost the vision of that life into the likeness of which it is the true purpose of the Spirit to transform this life. In other words, as we read in the book of Genesis, we are created in the image and the likeness of God. And we can't let anything of the world, whether it be religion, politics, culture, whatever it may be, deny us that truth. We must realize that we are created in the image and the likeness of God, and that image and that likeness, as Jesus said, it is the light that will shine through us, the light of God's power, the light of God's Spirit, and the light of God's intelligence as we focus our mind on God, as we turn to God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and love God. That loving God means to give God our attention, and equally important, to love our neighbor as ourselves, so that we aren't distracted by the things of the world. We're not distracted by the drama of politics or religion or any of the nonsense that goes on in the world, so that we can bring God into our mind in a greater way, that we can listen for that still small voice and actually hear it, and as it thunders through our intuitive mind, and so we can realize, as Jesus did, that I too have a part of God within me, that I too have the living Spirit of God living in me, as me, and for me, as we read in the Scriptures. In Him we live and move and have our being. In Him we live and move and have our being, but we must go the next step, as Jesus did, and realize that in us, this Spirit, this power, this intelligence seeks to express itself in the most joyous and wonderful and beautiful and prosperous way today and every day, through us, as us, and for us. And so it is. Amen. Once again, I want to thank you for being with me today. It's been my great pleasure to have you, and I hope you join me for my next broadcast right here on KTYM, AM 1460 radio, and at KTYM.com worldwide. You can find my full radio schedule by going to www.Rev, R-E-V, Bates, B-A-T-E-S, on the radio.org. That's Rev Bates on the radio.org. You'll find my full radio schedule, and you'll also find links to RevBates.tv and also to YouTube.com, where you'll find over 80 of my radio broadcasts that you can listen to 24/7 in both English and Spanish. You can also go to MSN, Yahoo, Bing, and Google and put in the search box Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, and you'll find everything you want to find out about this ministry. Now, you can make a faith offering and bring a greater gladness and a joy and gratitude into my heart today by going to www.revbates.tv or RevBates on the radio.org, using your ATM card or your credit card and the secure PayPal payment system. And you can also mail your prayer requests, questions, comments from those websites. And you can also mail those questions, comments, and faith offerings and prayer requests to Reverend Henry Bates. This is live, it's not recorded. Reverend Henry Bates, P.O. Box 1173. That's P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. And you can also leave me a telephone message in the Los Angeles area at 818-476-0088, or in Palm Springs at 760-778-4666. Once again, this has been The Way to a Wonderful Life, where you can find translations of my weekly messages posted on RevBates.tv in both English, Spanish, and Italian, and you can read those messages in whatever language you're comfortable with. There'll be 10 years of archived messages, 52 messages a year found on RevBates.tv, as well as information on the great Dr. Joseph Murphy, a tribute to Reverend Ike, Emmett Fox, and Dr. Robert Bitzer, and Dr. O.C. Smith, my teacher and my mentor, who taught me to believe and to accept that there is no spot where God is not. Dr. O.C. Smith, there is no spot where God is not, and I know that wherever he is in the presence of God, and that means that he's in the presence of good, wherever that may be and whatever he may be doing.